At the beginning of the 13th century, the Baltic was a contested frontier. The Livonian Teutonic Order, an autonomous branch of the Teutonic Order, had launched a crusade to subdue and Christianize the pagan peoples and the Orthodox Russians. At the same time, Mongol invasions from the east had devastated much of Russia. The Novgorod Republic, one of the main commercial and cultural centers of northern Russia, was in a critical situation following the Teutonic advance. The young Prince Alexander Nevsky was chosen as Novgorod's defender, and on April 5, 1242, after several skirmishes, Teutonic and Russian forces clashed at Lake Peipus. Alexander Nevsky, pursued by the Crusaders, chose a defensive position near Raven's Rock, on the eastern shore of Lake Peipus, at its narrowest point. It was spring, but the lake was still covered by a layer of ice. He commanded an army of approximately 5,000 men. In the center, he placed 3,000 Novgorod militiamen and Finnish allies, behind them 1,000 knights from his personal guard, and that of his brother, Andrei Yaroslavich. On the left flank was light cavalry, and on the right, 500 mercenary horse archers. The Crusaders, under the command of Hermann von Buxhoevden, numbered around 2,600 men. In the center, in the first line, were 100 Livonian Teutonic Knights and their aides. To their left were 600 Danes, and to their right, 800 Livonian vassals. In the rear were 1,000 Estonian and Swedish mercenaries. The Crusaders launched their attack from the lake as soon as they spotted their enemy. Their intention was to eliminate their leader, Alexander Nevsky, believing that the rest of the Russian army would then flee. The heavy cavalry, followed by the light cavalry and infantry, charged the Russian center where Nevsky was positioned. On the Crusaders' left flank, the Danes began to receive a heavy hail of arrows from the nomadic archers, hindering their attack. However, the rest of the line continued its advance across the frozen surface of the lake, with the Teutonic standards waving in the center. The impact was brutal, and initially the Novgorod line seemed to give way under the clash of hundreds of horsemen. However, the Russian infantry held firm. The Danish left flank continued to suffer heavy casualties from enemy arrows. In the Russian center, the archers began firing, weakening the troops accompanying the Crusader Knights who were slowly advancing behind them. The ice hampered any rapid maneuvers, and the initial Teutonic thrust began to lose momentum. Having failed to reach the enemy leader, the Teutons now found themselves embroiled in chaotic hand-to-hand combat against a vastly superior force. Before long, the Danish left wing began to flee due to the heavy losses suffered under the hail of projectiles and the lack of support. Seeing the left flank rout and the unfavorable situation in the center, the rear guard began to scatter. With the enemy exhausted and the Danes retreating, Nevsky gave the crucial order. The Russian cavalry, his elite force, fresh and eager to engage the enemy, went into action. While one part pursued the fleeing Crusaders, the rest began to press the enemy flanks, attempting to outflank them. Trapped in a formation designed for advance rather than defense, the Teutons began to lose cohesion. The ice creaked beneath the weight of men and horses. Although the mass sinking is more legend than reality, the terrain did play a decisive role, increasing the chaos and disorder. Seeing the desperate situation, the Crusaders began to retreat while maintaining order, but eventually the line broke. The retreat became a desperate flight. Some Crusaders managed to escape, but many were killed or captured in the ensuing pursuit. 20 Livonian knights died, and several hundred of their followers perished. When the fighting ended, Lake Peipus fell silent again, covered with the remains and traces of a decisive battle. Alexander Nevsky had achieved a great victory, The Battle of Lake Peipus was a turning point for the entire region. Novgorod halted the expansion of the Teutonic Order and consolidated its identity. The western borders of Russia, established after the battle, lasted for centuries, and the clash subsequently became a symbol of resistance, unity, and the defense of Slavic culture.